North Korea has nuclear weapons. North Korea has intercontinental ballistic missiles. North Korea is barking mad crazy. And Donald Trump says if China won't help him to fix this problem, then he's going to do it by himself. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the latest moves regarding North Korea. Pleasant change of tone from my feeling anyway. Steve, let's start with you. We had talked many times about the advantage of having a defense secretary named Mad Dog, Mattis, and all of that. And we began to wonder whether or not this is going to reflect itself in actual policy. Let me just set this up super fast. The argument for a preemptive strike against North Korea is the best argument I ever heard for any of these things is based on something called ambient risk. So as an example, if you go into a nightclub and there are a number of people in there with concealed carry permits, you might be in a room full of 100 people and 20 of them might have weapons. Your ambient risk stays the same. You have no way of knowing that there's anything different, so that's not actionable. However, if one of them pulls a gun and aims it at your head, now the ambient risk level is much higher. The risk to you is now critical, and you're justified in doing anything you possibly can, including killing that person, because your life now depends on their sanity, depends on their restraint, their discipline, and their sobriety and all the rest. So, do you think that that condition of heightened ambient risk is now to the point where President Trump can simply order a Tomahawk missile strike to destroy a North Korean missile on the pad?
If not, it's sure gonna be. Look, they're not quite to the ICBM stage yet, but this next generation missile that they're testing is supposed to be able to reach Hawaii, as in Pearl Harbor. We already had one ugly war start at Pearl Harbor, and I'd rather not get into another one. A preemptive strike strikes me as the sanest route. The first time I started looking seriously at North Korea was, must have been the early days of Vodka Puttis, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 years ago. And I realized that the best thing for North Korea then, the people of North Korea, would be for Chinese paratroopers to land on Pyongyang and just knock out that government and install a Chinese-friendly regime that wasn't bat guano crazy. But the thing is, China has enjoyed kind of having it both ways with North Korea. They get to have an ally, and China doesn't have a whole lot of friends around the world, and they get the crazy ally that keeps us on our toes. But the time has come that if China isn't going to act, then we are going to have to. This is a guy who sent assassination squads down to Indonesia. This is a guy who his own people, a defector, is saying he will use nuclear weapons. And those nuclear weapons are going to be able to reach U.S. soil. So again, Beijing, I am begging you, do something. Chop the head off of this evil puppet government of yours, or we're going to have to do it for you.
Scott, I want to come back to what Steve just mentioned about a high-level Korean defector who recently came over to the West and basically said he will use them. Prepare yourself. The North Korean government is the most reclusive, isolated government in the world. Everything that happens there is propaganda 24 hours a day. It sounds absolutely insane that a country that poor and that small would actually attack either Japan or the United States with a nuclear weapon. But there are, in fact, insane regimes. Do you think that this is, in fact, a case where something like this could actually happen? Do you think it's possible that Kim Jong-Un and all the rest of them are so filled with their own paranoia and their own grandiosity and all the rest of it to think that, no, this is probably worth doing? We are going to launch a nuclear missile. That's what the defector says is going on inside.
Absolutely, but it's not because he's insane. It's because he's incredibly rational and a student of history and of human nature. Kim Jong-un knows that when he talks like this, there's nobody in the world that wants to have anything to do with a missile being launched from anywhere that has a nuclear tip on it. There's also very little stomach in the United States for picking a fight with another country that hasn't yet opened a shooting war with us. So, I hate to say this, but I'm in volume 2 now of The Last Lion, William Manchester's biography of Winston Churchill, and he's spending a long time talking about how everybody in Great Britain and most of the rest of the world essentially tried to do everything they could to pacify Adolf Hitler, to downplay the fact that he was building up his own air force, to downplay the fact that he was training up militaristic youth practically from birth, and everybody wanted to do everything they could to avoid another terrible war. And as a result of that, they became victims of another terrible war, at least for the first several years, because we don't have the stomach to handle this. Now, I do like the idea of a president who basically says, look, we've got to solve these problems. I'm not really a fan of Steve's solution because I really don't want to increase, communist Chinese hegemony across the region any further than it already is.
But they wouldn't tolerate a Seoul-led regime all the way up to the Yalu River. You know Beijing wouldn't do that.
Yes. And South Korea, we used to have a partner in South Korea, and now they're in the midst of their own turmoil with Park Geun-hye, the South Korean president, being taken into custody because of corruption scandal going on there. So really, America stands alone in a sense. Again, I mean, we can ask for help from our Chinese partners, and I'm sure at Mar-a-Lago this week, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump are going to have some serious talks about stuff like this. I don't know if it's a Tomahawk missile strike on this thing, but we cannot sit by as they did while Adolf Hitler built up his conventional forces and allow Kim Jong-Un to build up his unconventional forces.
Hey, Scott, let me throw out a slightly less provocative solution to this thing. We have international waters surround North Korea. We could park a U.S. Navy ship equipped with Aegis shields and simply say to the North Koreans, we're enforcing a missile quarantine. Anything you launch, we're not going to strike North Korean soil. Anything you launch is going to get us SM-3, and we're going to knock it down.
A floating iron dome. I like that.
Yep.
There you go. Well, our ability to shoot down North Korean missiles has been degraded enormously over the last 8 years. The Barack Obama administration canceled things like the airborne 747 laser that could hit missiles in the boost phase and so on. I have a great deal of confidence in our ability to hit an single incoming warhead. But being in Los Angeles, I would like to find out, whether or not we can do this over the Pacific and not wake up one morning and find out the temperature's 4,000 degrees outside. So this idea of ambient risk, I think, is in fact the determining factor. I first heard it, as I said, dealing with personal firearms, and the question was, if you have a right to bear arms, where does that end? Do you have a right to an AR-15? Yes, I think so. What about a bazooka? What about a tank? You kind of got to be able. You should be able to stop whatever's coming after you from the government. What about a nuclear weapon? Should you be able to have your own nuclear weapon? And the answer to that, I think, quite clearly is no, because you are now raising the ambient risk for everybody around you. Everybody. You're not talking about defending yourself now. You're talking about you can't defend yourself with a nuclear weapon in your house, right? So you're talking about something that is beyond the pale, and that's what we've got. So just in summation, I'll say this. A crazy person in a cell is not a problem. A responsible person with a gun is not a problem. But a crazy person with a gun is a problem. And that's what we're facing in North Korea right now, and I think the clock is running out. And for the first time in 8 years, I feel like the clock is running out on them rather than running out on us. I'm Bill Whittle for Steve Green and Scott Ott. This is your Right Angle on North Korean Nukes, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com.